I took a white gel pen here and added a white swirl of her hair because I wanted it to pull out into the foreground in front of the poppies. It was not something I thought of initially because I kind of sketched this one really quickly. So I didn't take too long with my compositional choices, but as things started to play out and as I started to see how my colors were interplaying with each other and how my light and shadow were and the position of her face amongst these flowers, I decided I needed something to pull her more within the picture rather than having her just be in the background of it. By pulling those tendrils of hair out into the foreground, it kind of tangles her up into the full dimensions of the piece rather than having, oh, here's the flowers in the foreground and then here's her in the background and then here's the distant hazy stuff in the background. By pulling them out in the front like that, it makes everything rather more integrated. And see, now the flowers were dry finally, and so I started doing some more shading and detailing on them with my size 0 brush, tiny little bits of texture moving along. So I have my brush strokes move vertical, with the shape of the texture along the petals. So however the petals are curving, whichever directions they go, that's the direction that I drag my lines out so that you maintain this consistency. Little dark bits to the centers of those flowers. And then I did take a little bit of white here as well to add tiny touches of highlights. Same with all the rest of these flowers. This is mostly quinacridone red, quinacridone coral, and pink. And then a little bit of New Gamboge. I love using New Gamboge in like glazes over reds because it makes the reds really pop out with this bright, warm glow. I especially like to mix it with Winsor red. So that's a Winsor & Newton pigment instead of Daniel Smith, Daniel Smith is a majority of my pigments, but I have a few Winsor as well, Winsor & Newton. So you see, I keep going back into the background as well. I didn't do the background all at once because I wanted to gauge what my other tones and colors are in the painting and have those integrate well. So in order to do that, I have to see where I'm going with the colors in the foreground and then echo those into the background. So, as I add the red flowers, I added some more purpley tones into the background areas and into those negative spaces that I'm continuing to shade and push back, push back, push back. So each layer that I do in the background pushes it further backwards. The most foreground things, the things that pop out closest to the viewer are the places that you touch the least, because those are the brightest areas, the brightest colors. So with the background tangle of stuff, I just keep layering over time as I work on the piece, and each time I do another layer and another blending and another glaze over there, it makes those dark areas recede more and further. So here's some more negative space painting. You can see as I do this tangle of stems, it becomes more and more intricate as I do each of these sections of negative space glazing. And I only sketched out the main foreground stems. I didn't even sketch out all this other intricate background receding stuff. I let those happen as I paint. I let that happen sort of organically, and as the painting shapes up, I see what it needs and I see what I want it to do, and so I push those back. And I start adding more texture and more complexity to that. And then here I'm just doing a light glaze of a brighter green on those stems. I don't want to make them too dark because I don't want them to then recede into the background, but a light glaze gives them color and keeps them in the foreground still. This is some more distant, hazier background stuff. I do that by making the edges not quite so defined. And you can do that either with wet and wet, in the initial glazes and the initial washes, or over here what I did instead was I dry brushed lightly to shade out and fuzz out the edges of those top little buds and stems that are sticking out in the upper right. Tiny little bits of dark pinpoint shading areas with some concentrated Payne's gray or neutral tint. These little dark points are as important as little bright highlight points. These are, and you don't want to have too much of it. I mean, you can have a piece that is very, very heavy in the contrast, but I like to have these tiny little bits where it draws your eye to see these little bit of detailed points. So it's like tiny little dark areas and tiny little bright areas. And that's about it for this piece. Thank you for joining me today and listening to me talk about how this painting came about. Hope you enjoyed this time lapse. And if you enjoyed this, I have wonderful support from my backers at Patreon, www.patreon.com/Stephanie Law. And the support of these people helps to fund the creation of videos like this, as well as just my creative endeavors in general. And so I'm really thankful and grateful to this wonderful group of people and anyone who stops by to check out these videos and see what I'm doing. So thank you very much.